This podcast is a quest for well-being, a quest for a meaningful life through the exploration of fundamental truth. Enlightening ideas, insights on physical, mental, and spiritual health. The inspiration is love. The aspiration is to awaken new ways of thinking that can lead us to a new way of being well. Welcome to Body, Mind, and Soul Healing Conversations.
More than ever, this is a time of hope rather than despair. It's a time for listening with all our senses and being open to the answers when they come. Our ancestors heard the call of the forest, and they heard the song of nature. Now it's our chance to discover that forgotten wisdom. Valeria Teles interviews Liz Jansen, the author of Crash Landing, The Long Road Home. Healer, author, and motorcycle aficionado Liz Jansen combines her artistic mediums to create stories that inspire readers to embark on their own journey of self-discovery. No helmet or jacket required. Her healing approach blends wisdom from her experience as a registered nurse, corporate human resources professional, and certified practitioner in Shamanic Energy Medicine. Liz was born into a German Mennonite culture, the granddaughter of Russian refugees. At age 16, she began riding her brother's motorcycle on her family farm, and a motorcycle became her lifelong muse. In 2003, after leaving a 25-year marriage and a career in corporate human resources, she spent 2 months traveling across Canada and the United States, figuring out what to do next. Since then, Liz has logged hundreds of thousands of miles of mostly solo travel across Canada and the United States. While she enjoys the rugged beauty of Ontario's northern wilderness, she has a particular fondness for the open expanses of the Canadian prairies and Midwestern plains. In 2014, at age 60, Liz set out on a solo motorcycle quest, seeking the answer to how ancestral experiences and a culture she'd distanced herself from had shaped her. Barely 3 weeks into what was intended to be a 12 to 18-month trip through the Americas, a crash changed her trajectory and ushered in a period of stillness. 2 years later, back on her motorcycle, she completed that quest and got her answers. They weren't the answers she'd expected, and they'd appeared in a way she couldn't have imagined. Liz is a member of the Writers' Union of Canada and the Nonfiction Authors Association. She's the author of Women, Motorcycles, and the Road to Empowerment, Life Lessons for Motorcycles, and Crash Landing. She lives in Ontario with her cat Misha and Trudy, her Triumph Tiger motorcycle. Meet Liz at lizjansen.com. Here is the interview with Liz Jansen.
In your own words, who is Liz Jansen?
Liz Jansen came into this world on Mother's Day, actually. A tiny fiery bundle of energy. And I say fiery because I had fiery red hair. Mm-hmm. But I came in with a bundle of gifts and talents and energy that were raw at that time. And I think it's many years later from that day, but I still have those gifts and talents that I had. But I came to have fun, to have adventures on this earth, but also to be of service. So I'm still that same person. My hair's not as red. I still have those same gifts and talents, but they've been developed. I've added to them maybe, and maybe there's some that are yet to be discovered. And they've been developed over time. But I'm still that same person, but in perhaps a different format, a little older human being, but still that same person.
So talk to me for a moment about those gifts and talents that you have had and still have.
It's taken me a while to come around to this, but all of my gifts, I think, come around to healing. And they do this in different ways. When I started my career, my professional career, I went into nursing and I became a registered nurse, but that really wasn't wasn't for me. And I soon moved into other things. But right now, what it's evolved to, I do work through my words, healing through words, through my writing, I've trained as a shamanic energy healer. I do work through my motorcycling experience, which we probably will talk about, but I have used that as a healing tool and inspirational, and to create the environment, especially with women in motorcycling. Over the years, I've been very active with that to get people to experience their own empowerment. My first book was called Women, Motorcycles, and the Road to Empowerment. So that's a healing journey. And so all these things that I've been involved in, and when I was in the corporate world, which feels like a previous life to me, but it was my first half of my life, was I was involved in corporate training and development and coaching and that kind of thing. So all of these things all revolve around healing work. And that's what it's really come around to now. And that's what I focus on.
Talk to me for a moment about the connection between writing, telling stories, and healing.
When I write, and I also spend a lot of time in nature. I spend a lot more time in nature now than ever before. Right. And I write in nature also. And when you write, you don't know when you open up to it. You don't know what's going to come out on the page. At least that's how I write. If I know what's going to come out on the page, then there's really no point to it. So when I start out to, write a book, I don't know what's going to come out. I know that I have, there's something in me that has a story to be told, but I don't know what that story is going to be. I have a general idea, but I don't know where it's going to go. And so that part I have to leave to see what wants to come out. And it's always interesting to me to see what wants to come out. And what is also very interesting to me sometimes is when I'm trying to work things through for myself, or I'm trying to answer a question. Sometimes I'll go through, and not necessarily even with a book that I'm writing, but I'll go back because I blog too, and I'll look at the blogs that I've written and previous posts, and I'll look at them and I'll say, there's the answer I was looking for all along, and it's something that I've already written. It's there. There's the answer.
In a way, writing is exploring the unknown, isn't it, Liz?
It is. Yeah. It is. And sometimes I'll ask a question to myself or to whoever's listening, and say, what is this? And then I'll write whatever the answer is and see what comes out.
We resist or are afraid of the unknown. Do you wonder why most of us reject what we don't know?
Oh, I don't wonder why at all. It can be frightening because you don't know what that answer is going to be. And then and then how are you going to respond, right? What if it's something you don't like?
Right.
And then how do you live true to your value? How do you live true if you've said you're going to listen to that and you don't like the answer?
Yeah.
Right?
For you, what is healing? Is that a destination or somehow a process, a journey, ongoing journey?
It's an ongoing journey. Everyone needs healing. And it's a word that sometimes I think it's overused, but we all need healing. And just when we think, we think we've got it, and then something else opens up, or something, we go through a time of challenge, or something that opens up the cracks, and those cracks let more light in, and it opens us up to, oh, I didn't know that, and there's more, something hurt or painful or something that we see that we couldn't see before, that we see now because there's more light coming in. And now we're on a journey of different healing. And so it's an ongoing, and I think that's part of our earth journey. We're always on a healing journey here. And that's part of the reason we're here. And it's not just for ourselves. When we heal ourselves, it's not just us that's healing. We're healing those around us, and not just humans. I think we're healing other beings around us as well, as in nature.
Do you believe in enlightenment?
I don't know really what to say about that, because I believe it's possible you can have epiphanies, enlightenment moments, and I don't strive. I know that people strive for enlightenment. I strive to be the best that I can all the time, and however that, if however that unfolds, it unfolds, and so that's how I go about my life.
So the title of your book is Crash Landing, The Long Road Home. That word home, so when you say home, does it imply a destination? What is home to you, Liz? What does it feel as home?
Home is coming back to who I am, finding out who I am before others have told me who I am, before I'm being who I think I should be, or who others have told me who I am in my heart of hearts. Who I'm here to be, who that little bundle of energy is that came into the world before others started shaping her and telling her stories about who she should be and what she should expect out of life. Yeah.
So it's coming back to ourselves, that return to oneself.
Yes, it's coming back to ourselves.
What does it feel like?
It feels wonderful. It feels wonderful. But it does feel wonderful. It's very freeing and liberating. It's also can be frightening, because then you've also got the other voices, because we all have stories. We have them, and we've been conditioned by people, our parents. I mean, they mean the best, right? They're the best intentioned, and our culture, and everybody tells us stories, and there's expectations. But when we want something, or when we feel that who we are is something different than that, I mean, it took me a long time to break free of that. And so it takes a great deal of courage to do that. And so freeing isn't just, it's not a destination either. It's an ongoing journey.
Do you connect spiritual exploration to self-discovery? And if you do, what is your idea of spirituality?
I do connect it with self-exploration. I think for me, spirituality, the sacred, it's all one. I find that, the sacred, I don't differentiate it. I'm part of the sacred. The sacred is in me. It's in everything that I see. It's in nature. I'm in part of that. It's all part of who I am. And it's how I go about my life. It's part of, the creative energy that's in me, and it's how I operate. Everything is spiritual. Everything is sacred.
I love that idea too. We have so many ideas, concepts, but there are some that just resonates with something deeper in us. In the way you speak, everything's spiritual, everything's sacred. It resonates true to me.
Yeah, and that's not saying that, there are different belief systems that can fit into that also.
Right.
But I think that on the whole, this is who we are, and we're part of, we're part of creation, and that's who we are.
Yeah, no separation, right.
There's no separation, and God is in us, if we want to call it God, the being, the creation, the creative force, and we're part of that.
Yeah.
And we need to honor that.
There is this feeling, because I have that, so many of us, people that I talk to, that we're trying to help others to get there. And I wonder sometimes if everything's just perfect. Maybe everything's good, perfect the way it is. There's no change that need to be made. But then we see the violence, the ignorance and all that. I mean, we perceive as that. And then we want to change. And then by trying to do that, we are actually causing more suffering. Like in my case, by seeing people around me, my family members, acting a certain way, there's a feeling of sadness. And I'm wondering if that's necessary, really, Liz. If I can release that somehow, or we can.
I see the same thing, and we see more of that now.
Yeah.
And we go back to, what's behind that, what's causing that. Yeah. Because people are still, even though they're acting in ways, and I'm seeing that more with people that I thought I knew, and they're coming out with the most bizarre things. Yeah. And I'm thinking, where did that come from? And why are you saying that? And because they're acting from what their truth, right? Yeah. And so the whole thing about listening and trying to understand each other is more important now than ever. And there's more opportunities for that now than ever. And I think that's what these times are showing us. That, and I have been shown myself that I have blind spots. When we talk about waking up to our stories, it's right. Like I've been shown my own blind spots that I've been oblivious to. And it's like I have to wake up also.
Talk to me a bit more about, Liz. What do you mean by that when you say wake up to our own stories? What is the meaning of that?
Well, sometimes we go about and we live in, I consider that I live in privilege. I live simply, but I don't have to worry about where my food is coming from, or that I live in a place of shelter. I don't have to worry about those kinds of things, but many people around me do. Let me point out another thing. In my very first book, and this came home to me very recently, and in my first book, Women, Motorcycles, and the Road to Empowerment, and I interviewed 50 women. Well, one of them was me, and I was recently interviewing another woman who was Black, and she was asking me, also a motorcycle rider, and we were talking, and she was asking me different questions. And I like to say that, the book describes a diversity of women and that come from a cross-section of lifestyle, and that shows how, that through motorcycling, they discovered their strengths and different things like that. Yeah. They discovered their strengths and then how they were able to use it in different parts of their lives. And I always talk about how I talked about a diverse group of women. And I'm talking to this Black woman, and I realized this actually a couple of years ago, but it just came home to me that out of 50 women, I have 3 in this book of 50 that are racially diverse. And I hadn't even thought of it. Like, I just had not thought of it. And she wasn't pointing it out to me, but I was looking at her and I was thinking, oh my God, I didn't even think of it. Right. So like things like that. And we don't even think of because it's just not in my eyesight.
What happens when we finally realize something that we never did before in our entire lives?
Well, it wakes me up to not just that, to be watching for not just skin color or differences like that, but also other things. But to be looking where people are outside of just the world that I live in, and the needs of other people that maybe are stopping. They no longer talk about their needs because they're tired of it because nobody listens to them. Right. Right? Or people that are homeless or need food, or they're embarrassed to ask for help. It makes me more awake to their stories or open to the needs of others. When you see something that was so blatant. I mean, it wasn't a blatant disregard on my part, but it did show that. It held up a mirror to me.
Right. So it's paying attention more. I love the way you say, the blog you sent me, the difference between listening and hearing. That's very different. Yeah. Yes. To me, what comes is self-awareness, just paying attention more in general, every moment, which is hard work, isn't it, when you think about it? When I think about being and just relaxing and being and not just doing, then when I think about the work of self-awareness, that sounds like doing. I'm not sure if that's what's happening, but it might be that it takes work. doesn't it, Liz, to really
It
uncover
does.
ourselves.
It does. And when we talk about listening versus hearing, it's like listening is using all our senses and not just talking and not being aware of what's going on around us. Right? Not being aware.
What is your perspective on intuition? How do we learn to trust that voice more?
We practice it.
Yeah.
And that's how. And we learn to trust it. But we learn by practicing it, because sometimes we're not sure, right? Is it intuition or is that something not? So we trust it and say, I'm going to trust you. And so, and we do it. And then only by trusting it and going by that feeling. And even when we think, I don't know, I don't really want to, it goes back to, when we were writing and getting an answer that we didn't like, but that's what we asked for, right? And it's the same with our intuition. Well, you asked me, here's what I'm telling you. Okay, I asked for this, so I'm going to trust you with the answer. And then your intuition gets stronger as you practice using it.
What are the signs, Liz, that you have seen in your own life from your experience? What are the signs when we are listening to our intuition? Are there some very clear signs?
Well, the signs are that something happens that you will get an answer that you know is right.
Right.
I guess that's the clearest thing. When you follow your intuition or something happens that wouldn't have happened had you not followed your intuition.
Right.
Those are the things that.
I have heard someone saying that love is the way to know when it's coming from love, whatever thoughts we have, ideas. Does it resonate true to you or not?
Yes,
sometimes
it does. But I suppose I like to think that all my thoughts come from love. It comes from trust, too. I remember my dad, one of the last things he said to me, he said, I trust. And that was the very last thing. He says, I trust. And that's got to do with intuition, too. And he was so peaceful when he was dying. Yeah. And it all came down to trusting. Oh, and that's intuition, too. Yeah.
Was he engaged in spirituality somehow or religious beliefs?
Oh, he was very much so. But at the end, I shouldn't say he dropped them. He became, his death was so peaceful and such a spiritual experience that I've worked in nursing. I've seen many people pass. Right. And I've never seen anything like this. And so it was quite an experience, his passing. Yes.
The fear of losing the physical body is very common for most of us. Do you still have doubts or fear when it comes to imagining, visualizing that moment?
I don't know what's going to happen. Right. And there's always a fear of the unknown, right?
Yes.
I do know that it will happen. But I also know that, and I can't say that I would be without fear, but I know that it will happen. And I know that I won't let it dominate my life or control my life. I live every day as if it could be my last. And when I do get to the time that it is my last, I know that I will not have any regrets, that I want to live each day fully. And that's how I want to live my life, how I do live my life.
And so you wrote the book, as I mentioned earlier, Crash Landing, The Long Road Home. Talk to me about how did you become a writer and what was the main inspiration and intention of writing your book?
Becoming a writer was accidental, or certainly wasn't on my list. When I left my corporate world and set out on my own, I did some major life changes around age 48. And I was working with an executive coach and had to write out, some 10-year goals. And one of them I just wrote down. See, this is what happens when you write things down. Mm-hmm. Become a writer. Write a book, I wrote. And so the 10 years were coming up and I had to write a book. So that's how I wrote my first book. And I started writing some other things as well. But that's how I became a writer anyways. I started, and my writing was about women and motorcycling, but it was also, the writing motorcycle riding that I did some of the technical part of it too, but it was more about the spirituality of motorcycling and the two-wheeled wisdom. So that's what I did. And that's about in motorcycling. And when I wrote Crash Landing, it was at age 60 that I decided I was going to go on a quest on my motorcycle. And I had been raised in a fundamentalist background, and I had really disengaged from it. I had not claimed that, and I had been ashamed of it. I had not been telling anybody about my background. But I knew at age 60 that if I wanted, which I did, to make the most of the rest of my life, I had to understand those stories and how they had shaped me. So I wanted to go on a quest and understand. I wanted to understand my grandparents. They were refugees. They came to Canada in the 1920s after a civil war, after the Bolshevik Revolution. And so I thought, if I can go and put myself in their shoes from when they were in their early 20s and just coming here as penniless refugees, I could understand their stories better and put myself in their shoes. And then I could understand why they taught their children as they did, who taught me as they did. And of course, the best way for me to go traveling and on a quest was by motorcycle, because that's how I do my best thinking. And so initially, I was going to go on a trip. I live in Ontario, and I was going to go across Western Canada. And then I was going to continue. I sold everything. I was going to go down through South America, which was just on a bit of an adventure, and be gone for 18 weeks. But 3 weeks into that, I crashed. And so just, that stopped the trip. But what I really wanted to learn from that was, understanding their stories and how that influenced me. And I always knew I would write about it, because I knew I would have something to share with readers about that, because everybody has a story, and everybody's got stories that have shaped them and that have shaped them into something. I didn't know at the beginning that the title would be Crash Landing, or it might not have gone. But we all have crashes, right? We all have crashes in different ways. And my grandparents certainly had many crashes. And, how did they come through those? And how did the way they come through those influence me? And then how did the land that they live in, how did that all influence me as well? And so that was the inspiration and the intention behind what I did.
Wow.
And so I needed more time. So I wasn't ready to continue further on that first trip. I eventually did go back and finish it.
You did?
But I wasn't ready. Yes, I did.
Wow.
And so that was the story. And it was really a reconnection. I mean, that was definitely a healing journey, an amazing journey. And the healing journey isn't just in writing the book or in the finished product itself. It's everything that happens along the way, and the people you meet and interact with, and everything. It was quite an amazing journey.
Talk to me about, how did you become interested in motorcycles, in riding them? I asked you off record, but now is the time to explore that.
I started riding a motorcycle when I was 16. My parents had a farm. They grew peaches, cherries, a fruit farm. Yeah. And my brothers got a little motorcycle to ride around the farm, and I started riding it, and I've never stopped. So it was just something I did, and I never thought twice about it. Right. So I just continued riding it, and I've loved it. I call it my muse. And I don't ride as much now, but I've ridden a lot.
And what is it about riding a motorcycle for you, Liz, that it seems to me that connects you deeper with yourself, with this sense of experiencing life at the fullest? That's what it comes to me, that the way you experience that motorcycling thing. So for most of us women, it also comes across as a very courageous thing to do.
It does come across as courageous for women. When you're 16 and you learn to ride a motorcycle, what's going to happen? Nothing, right? You just go out and ride. But when you're an adult, and that's why I was in such a good position to help women learn to ride, because I had learned to ride when I had no fear of riding. But to overcome that, because again, those are a lot of stories that we put in our head.
Right.
There's some substance to them, don't get me wrong. But a lot of times those stories are limiting for no reason. And there's ways of overcoming them. I mean, learning. And I taught a lot, taught motorcycle lessons too. But it's just so symbolic of, if you can learn to ride a motorcycle, you can learn to do anything.
Yeah, I would say so.
Right? And,
yes.
and there's ways of learning how to do it safely. But you really connect. I mean, you talked about nature before, and getting out on the open road, and just, we talk about listening and hearing, using all your senses when you're out there, and connecting and connecting with all of that, and the freedom of the road, and feeling that, and the insights that you get, and the people that you meet, and people connect with you, riders and non-riders alike, in such a different way, and the experiences that you have. It's quite an amazing experience.
The mind tries to imagine what would that feel like, and the sense of freedom. And I love this idea that we, by being on a motorcycle, can connect better to nature, because I love nature, walking in nature, but I never thought about riding a motorcycle. That never came to me. So that's a very unique thing. And I don't see a lot of women, like I live in Florida, and I don't see a lot of women doing that, mostly men. So, and I'm wondering, why is that something that men are attracted to, because of the fear factor, that they have less fear? Or it's just that women are not given the opportunity, really, to experience these things? Oh,
there's many reasons for that. And but there's more and more women riding now than ever before. And more events, and the industry has got a lot more going on for women. There's still a minority of riders are women, but I'm going to say, and I'm guessing at this, it could be up to 20% of riders are women. That may be high, but it varies depending if you're talking about if you're riding on the road or if you're doing trail riding and that kind of thing. But there is more now for women than a lot of many years before. So
that's good to know. And this is not something that is of interest, because I know that women in general, they are interested in different things than men are. Nursing is one of those things. I noticed that taking care of people, women are very much attracted to that, the nurturing.
Well, and also women, when women are having children and looking after children and looking after the household oftentimes, although I know what men share in that responsibility as well. But, a lot of times that falls on the woman. And so they're not out riding motorcycles when they're doing that. They're looking after their family.
Maybe one day. I'll let you know, Liz. If I get to do that. That'll be interesting. Very interesting. So we're almost at the end. Would you like to add anything, any topic that we didn't discuss about your book, or read a passage in your book?
I'm not going to read a passage, but what I will do, I'll read the endorsement off the front cover, because I think that explains the book. And it's from my beloved teacher, Araya Mountain Dreamer. She was my teacher for many years and very inspirational to me, very meaningful. And she said, "Stories change us. Liz Jansen's story is both an adventure and his mesmerizing process of excavating the meaning, messages, and magic embedded in our everyday lives. Her journey is an invitation to be awake to the story our lives and the lives of our ancestors is telling. And that kind of story heals the heart."
What was the hardest lesson to learn about yourself and life as of today?
That I don't control nearly as much as I think I control.
Oh, my God.
Or that I like to control. That there's very little that I am in control of.
That's a huge reminder for all of us. Yeah, for me, certainly. What is your perspective on unconditional self-love?
That's also a hard lesson. Because we're trying to be kind to ourselves, in spite of what we do to ourselves, or, what we're telling ourselves of how we can be better, or how we could always do better when we do something that we're not very proud of. And then we have to love ourselves anyways. But we do. I mean, we try our best, right? And we make mistakes, and then but we love ourselves anyways.
Yes.
So, yeah.
That's another.
If we don't love ourselves, so how can, we need to operate. We want to operate from a place of unconditional self-love. And then we can offer that to others as well. If we know that, then we can offer that to others. We need to know it to offer it.
2 more questions for you. If you knew you would die soon, meaning leaving the body, would you make any change or do anything differently?
No. We talked earlier, I try and live every day as if it could be my last or my last moment. Yeah. So there's nothing that I would change.
I love that answer.
Yeah. No, I would keep it as and I do that exercise often.
Yeah, you do.
Thinking,
right.
I do. It's like sort of a calibration. It's like, when I'm doing something, it's like, okay, would I be doing this if I knew this was my last day?
Right.
Would I be doing this? No.
That's a great question to ask. Would I wake up and do what I do if today was my last day on earth, on this body? That's a great question. I do ask often too. I think it's a very important question to ask. And my last question is, what are 3 things about life you know for sure as of this moment?
Okay, 3 things. Well, 3 things. First of all, life is an adventure.
Yeah.
And in 3 ways, in 2 ways, it can be a fun. Adventures can be fun and exciting, but they can also be very challenging and painful. Right. And we don't always know the nature of the adventure that's going to come our way, but we know that there will be an adventure somehow, and that we will need to navigate through it. The second thing is that there are always helpers, and those helpers are seen and they are unseen, but they are always around us. And that is grace, and that is trusting that helpers will be around. And sometimes we need to ask, but we don't always. It's just there for us, but helping helps.
Yeah.
We can ask for help. And then the third thing is that life always wins.
Life always wins. That's an interesting phrase to hear. So
life is always working for life.
Yeah.
So that, maybe our human body doesn't live forever, but when we look at, I can use nature as an example, and we do things, and we think that, that we do things to our environment, and things we can do things to the forest that make trees die. But then next thing you know, like a forest, say for example, a forest fire, but then next thing you know, there's new growth coming up. Yeah. Right?
Yeah. Mm.
Nature is always working for life. Life is always working for life.
Wow, I love that message too. Yeah, so life will always be there. There's no such a thing as no life.
Life is always there.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Liz, for your
beautiful
you, presence. Yeah, I love your wisdom, your clarity, the work you do to help not just heal the soul, deepest parts of us, but also the surface too, the fears, so we can become more joyful, more playful with life. That's what resonates to me when you talk about motorcycling. It's fun to open up the heart so we can play more in this realm. Mm-hmm. Where can we find more information about you, your books, products, services, and future projects?
The best place is on my website, which is at Liz Jansen, all one word, .com.
Wonderful. You now have that link on your podcast profile. Thank you so much again, Liz, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Valeria.
Thank you. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening. To learn more about Liz Jansen and her work, please visit lizjansen.com. To learn more about this podcast, please visit fitforjoy.org/podcast. Thank you again for listening, and bye for now.